Hey y'all, and welcome. In today's video, I'm going to be taking you through a sew along of Vogue 1973. This beautiful pussy bow blouse features a tie collar and concealed placket. In today's sew along, I'll be making view B, which has a bishop sleeve and gathers. I cut the size 14, which has finished garment measurements of 40.5 at the bust, 39.5 at the waist, and the lower edge is 45.5. And for reference, my measurements are 38 at the bust, 33.5 at the waist, and 45.5 at the hip. Of course, you'll need your fabric, some interfacing, and according to the pattern, about 13 half-inch buttons. But you'll see later on, I did deviate from that, plus 2 other modifications, one to the collar and one to the hem. And the fabric that I used was a blue and white abstract dot stretch silky print from Joann's. All right, let's get into it. So the first piece you're going to need is pattern piece number 1, your right front. You're going to cut one of that. Pattern piece number 2 is the left front. You're also going to cut one of that. Pattern piece number 3 is your back. You're going to cut one on fold. Pattern piece number 4 is your tie. You're going to cut 2 of those. Pattern piece number 6, your continuous lap. You're going to cut 2 of those. Pattern piece number 8, your sleeve. You're going to cut 2. And finally, pattern piece number 9 is your cuff. You're going to cut 2 of your fabric and 2 of your interfacing. All right, let's get started. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is grab pattern piece number 1, your right front, and pattern piece number 2, your left front. And you're going to want to go ahead and sew up your darts and then press them toward the bottom of the shirt. So go ahead and do that for both darts. Once you have your darts sewn and pressed toward the bottom, you're going to grab pattern piece number 3, which is the back piece. Now you can do this one of 2 ways. You can attach the front to the back, right sides together, matching up your notches at your shoulder seam and sew across your 5/8 of an inch. And at both your side seams, and then sewing it at 5/8 of an inch. Because I'm using a French seam to finish this off, I'm going to match my front and my back with wrong sides together. I'm going to pin at the side seam and the shoulder seam. I'm going to stitch across 1/4 of an inch, trim the seams down to about 1/8 of an inch, flip them over to the inside and press, and then stitch one final time at 3/8 of an inch. So if you're doing it the normal way, just match right sides together and sew your 5/8 inch seam allowance. If you're doing a French seam to join your front and back pieces, go ahead and do that now and then meet me back here. All right, so now that you have your side seams and your shoulder seams combined, so working with our right front side of the fabric, what you're gonna do is fold this edge over, and I have my lines marked here. So this is your outer edge line and your inner edge line. Fold this over along the outer edge line and then baste it down along this inner fold line. But I'm gonna do one extra step before basting it down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this strip of interfacing and I'm going to fuse it to the wrong side of my fabric. Let's just flip this over so that way you can see it. This piece of interfacing is going to go here, but essentially you want that strip of interfacing on the wrong side of the fabric, just like this. You want it to line up with that outer edge line, and you'll still have your seam allowance hanging here, but essentially it should be in between those big dots. And this strip of interfacing piece is about the same size of the placket piece. So actually I'm going to go ahead and grab my ruler so I can give you an exact measurement, and it should be roughly about an inch and a quarter wide. All right, so once you have that piece of interfacing fused and that outer fold line pressed down, Then go ahead and baste it across the inner fold line. Okay, once you have it basted down, here's where I'm really going to deviate from the instructions. So what I want you to do is go ahead and fold it over again one more time along that second outer fold line. So you're going to take it over to your iron and press this at that fold. Now, the instructions would, after you baste it here, it has you go ahead and put in your buttonholes, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go back and put my buttonholes in last, put my buttons on, all that good stuff. And it has a portion where you flip this over, stitch it, and then you have this edge here kind of hanging loose. I don't like the look of that, so what I'm going to do is carry on my tie when we get ready to put that on all the way to the edge of it, just so that way the tie goes the full length of the front placket. I think that's a much cleaner look, but if you want to follow the instructions to the T, that is totally fine. But I'm going to show you the way I do it with this hidden placket. So again, you're just going to, once you have it basted down and you have that little extra bit of seam allowance hanging, you're just going to take it, fold it over along that second outer fold line and press it. Then once you have that pressed down, you're going to sew along the center here for the inner fold line. And when you do that, it's going to fold over like this. So it'll be lined up with the center front. So I'll show you what I mean on the pattern pieces. So just pretend this is the wrong side of the fabric. And we've already folded this over to that outer fold line. This is basted down. So what we're going to do, we're going to fold this over, and then you'll stitch along that inner fold line. And then once you do that, it catches the seam allowance, and that placket folds over, and we'll fold it again one more time and press it. But I'll show you that once we do that. So once you do that, it'll be folded up like a sandwich here, and then you can see what I mean. The center front will still be lined up, and then you can go back in and put your button. You can put your buttonholes in after that if you want to, or if you want to wait to the end, you can do that too. So one more time with the fabric. We're here, we're basted down, and this is that outer fold line. So we're gonna take the fabric over to the iron, fold and press along this last outer fold line, and then we're gonna stitch down the middle, and then fold it back over and press, and we'll have our placket. Now, when you stitch it down, this is the top. When you're stitching along this inner line, what you're gonna do is stop. Don't go all the way to the bottom, just stop shy of about 1 5/8 inch here. So I'll go ahead and mark it. And here we go, we've got it pinned. So go ahead and stitch all the way down to about 1 5/8 of an inch from the bottom. Do that and come on back. So once you have it stitched down that inner fold line, and again, stop at that 1 5/8 of an inch point and press down, it should look like this. So you see you still have that fold over placket. And again, I have not added my buttonholes yet, but once you have it the right side to this point, if you want to go ahead and add your buttonholes down on this side, you can, or again, you can wait to the end for that. As I pressed it, my buttonhole markings kind of faded away, so I'm going to have to remark that before I put my buttonholes in, but we'll go ahead and continue. Now that we've got this done on our right side, now we're going to go ahead and work on our left side. All right, my lovely. So I'm going to show you what to do on the left hand side. So first I'm going to show it on the pattern just so that way the lines are a little bit more clear to see. So just like we did on the right side, we're going to take a strip of interfacing that's about 1.25 inches. Let me just measure it, double check here. So about 1.25 inches wide piece of fusible interfacing, and same length as your pattern piece. So this is your left. So what we're going to do is for this one, we are going to take it all the way to the edge and fuse it to the wrong side of the fabric. Line it up with this fold line, and it even tells you on the pattern piece, this fold line is for your interfacing. So we're going to fuse that, fold it over and press it, and then you're going to fold it over again and press along this fold line, because what it's going to do, it's going to create a facing piece. So once you have that folded down and you're folding in, so this will be the right side of your fabric showing, this is the wrong side. So once you have this folded over twice and press flat, you're going to stitch, of course pin this down, but I'm going to show you on the fabric. And we're going to stop about 1 5/8 inch away from the edge. We're going to stitch as close as possible here, just along the edge. So it's about, you're going to catch this at about like roughly 1/8 of an inch as you're stitching down along that fold line, but just catching the very edge. And then same here, about 1/8 of an inch here, and stitch all the way down. So I'll show you what that looks like on your fabric. Okay, and again, we're working with the left side of our blouse. So I have this flipped over just so that way you can see where I've marked off all the lines. So that first line for the interfacing, and the second fold over line for the facing part. So I'm going to flip this over. Alrighty, so this is our fusible interfacing. And unlike on the right side where we had that seam allowance hanging over, you're not going to have anything hanging over on the left side. So you're going to fuse this, and my fabric's just a tad teensy bit uneven here, but that's okay. Alrighty, so you're going to fuse this piece along the edge, take that over to your iron, go ahead and fuse that down. And then once you have it fused, just remember, fold over. Where's that line? Up, there it is. Fold over. If you've marked it, you'll be able to see it on your fabric, but fold over on that interfacing line and press that down. So go ahead and do that. We'll come back and we'll continue. All right, so we got that piece of interfacing fused down, and we've got it pressed down on that interfacing fold line, and then turn it in one more time, and also have it pressed down on the fold line for the facing. So we're in good shape so far. Just to make sure y'all see this, there's our stopping point here. So once you have it pressed in place and fold over, you're going to pin this down, and then again stitch from the top of your blouse about 1/8 of an inch inward, or as close to the edge as possible, all the way down to our stopping point. Then same on this side. We're going to stitch along this edge here about 1/8 of an inch, or as close to the edge as possible, all the way down to our stopping point. Go ahead and stitch that down, the two sides of your placket. Do that and come on back. All right, now that you've got your placket stitched down on the left hand side, you can also go ahead and stay stitch the neckline, starting after the placket on the right side and going around the neckline to the other side and stopping at the left placket. So go ahead and do that and then come back. All right, once you have your stay stitching done on your neckline, we're going to take the shell of the blouse and put it to the side. And then go ahead and grab your ties, which is pattern piece number 4. On each of the tie pieces at the large dot, you'll want to make a line of reinforcement stitching. So about 5/8 of an inch on each side of stitching. Once you have that stitching done, you're going to clip to the dot, but don't clip through the stitching. Once you do that, you're going to stitch at your 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and combine your ties on the side where that notch is. So do that and then come back. All right, so once you have your reinforcement stitches in and it clipped to the big circle and the back of the tie stitched together, take it over to your iron, open it up, and you're going to press the seam open. Once you've done that, you're going to fold it in half and then pin it closed. You're going to stop at the clip portion. So let's go ahead and do that. Once you have it all pinned, go ahead and stitch from where you clipped all the way down to the end, and the same on the other side. So from that clip point all the way down to the end. Do that and come right back. Once you have the tie stitched together, you're going to go ahead and trim down this seam and clip your corners. And you're only trimming it down to these clipped edges. Once you have it trimmed and your corners clipped, then you're going to take it over to your iron, and this side of the tie between the clips that doesn't have the notch, you're going to fold it inwards at your 5/8 inch seam allowance and press it down. So let's get that done. So far, if you're getting valuable information from this video and it's been helpful to you, consider subscribing and share this video with your favorite seamstress or a creative friend. And tell me in the comments, if you haven't picked up this pattern yet, is this one that you try? Let me know. All right, let's get back to it. Okay, now that we've got it trimmed, we're going to take it over to the iron and press down this unnotched edge at our 5/8 inch seam allowance. And then while we're over at the iron, once you have that pressed down, turn the tie back over to the right side and then press that out flat. So let's head over to the iron and get that done. Okay, so now that we've got the tie flipped out and pressed, you're going to grab your top and we're going to pin the tie to the blouse, starting at the center back. So right sides together on that notched edge. Okay, and then we're going to pin it all the way to the ends. Now, because of the change that we made with the placket, we're not going to match up this notch here. So the notch on the tie and the notch on the top of the blouse, we are going to just match it up from end to end. So we're going to match up here. So I'll zoom in. So again, we're ignoring these notches. We're not matching up at the 2 notches. We're just going to pin this straight across here on both sides, taking it all the way to the edge of the placket. So let's go ahead and get that pinned up. Okay, and I'm going to clip into my neckline just a little bit. Once you have your tie pinned to your neckline, you're going to sew it at 3/8 of an inch. So you're going to start from the center back So across 3/8 of an inch all the way to the end, and then start from the center back, and sew across 3/8 of an inch all the way to the other end. So let's take it over the machine, do that now, and then come back. All right, so once you have your tie stitched onto your blouse, you're going to take the tie, flip it over to encase that seam. Then you're going to pin it in place over that seam. And then to close it, you can either hand slip stitch this or baste it and then flip it over to the outside and stitch in the ditch. I'm going to go ahead and pin this in place, and then I'm going to hand baste it, flip it over, and stitch in the ditch. Okay, it's coming together nicely. So we've got our tie stitched onto our blouse. We got that placket encased in the tie. Okay, so for now, we're going to take our blouse, put it over to the side, and we're going to work on our sleeves. Okay, so let's grab our sleeves. We're sewing gathering stitches between the two dots along the top of the cap, and sewing from the bottom up to the top, pivot and come back down, and then along this center line here, we're going to slash up to the stitching, but not through the stitching. All right, so let's go ahead and do that and come back. Okay, so once you've got your gathering stitches done and this stitch and clip situation at the bottom here, go ahead and grab pattern piece number 6, which is your continuous lap. So we're going to do a little bit of prep on this piece. Take this over to your ironing board and turn up 1/4 of an inch on that unmarked, so the side without the dots, the unmarked side, turn up 1/4 of an inch seam allowance and press. Go ahead and do that. Okay, so now that you've got that 1/4 of an inch pressed up on that continuous lap piece, or both of the continuous lap pieces rather, what you're going to do is you're going to take your sleeve and stretch this out. Now you're going to attach the right side of the fabric to the wrong side of your sleeve, and you're going to match up those dots. Okay, so we're going to take our sleeve, turn it upside down, lay it flat with the right side up. We're going to take this short end over here and fold it back. Just keep folding it back. Keep folding it back until that end here kind of straightens out. You're going to take the continuous lap piece, and on the right side, you're going to pin along your little dots. You're going to pin the right side of the lap to the wrong side. So once you got it pinned in place on both sleeves, you're going to go ahead and stitch that down. Now when you stitch, you'll want to start off stitching with 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, but as you stitch closer to that center dot, you're going to want to taper it down to about 1/8 of an inch, or just so that way it catches that very tip of the sleeve here, and then pivot and then stitch back from about 1/8 of an inch and taper out back out at about 1/4 of an inch. I'll show it again on the opposite sleeve just so that way you can see it with both sides. So we're going to take this shorter side, fold this back, okay, pull it till that straightens out as much as possible. Okay, second continuous lap piece here. I'm just going to flip it down, that way I know where those dots are. I'm going to match up this right side to the wrong side of the sleeve. I'm just going to slide it up under here and pin it in place. So once you have that pin in place, Same thing as the other arm. So you're going to start off at the 1/4 of an inch and taper down to about 1/8 of an inch. Really what you can do is, I'll zoom in closer just so we can see it. You can actually follow that line of stitching on the sleeve itself, just so that way you can see where it tapers. So starting at 1/4 inch here, kind of follow along that line of stitching, pivot here as you're tapering down, kind of pivot here and then come back out. But really, if you follow that row of stitching, you'll be safe. And I think now that I'm thinking about it, and y'all can call me goofy for this in the comments, I think that that's what that row of stitching was intended to do, is act as a guideline for when you're stitching that continuous lap down. But it would be nice if it indicated that in the instructions. So and if you don't believe me, you can go to number 27 of the instructions right now and check and tell me what it says in the comments. Once you got it pinned down, y'all, go ahead and take it over to the machine and stitch it down. Okay, y'all, mission accomplished. Okay, so once you have the continuous lap part stitched down, what you're going to do is you're going to press this bit of seam allowance toward the continuous lap. Then you're going to fold that loose edge over, covering up that seam. Press it flat. Then you're going to top stitch that across there to secure it in place. So let's take it over to the ironing board. We're going to press it, and then I'll pin it, and then we'll stitch it down. Okay, now that we've got this pressed and pinned in place, we'll take it over to the machine and top stitch it down along the very edge here. All right, let's get her done. So once you have your continuous lap stitched down, you're going to turn your sleeve over to the wrong side. You're going to pinch them together like this and sew a diagonal line across the top here. So a diagonal line across this little corner. Once you've done that, then you're going to take the tail end of it that's closest to the notch side, fold it toward the wrong side, and baste this down in place. Go ahead and do that for both of your sleeves. Okay, once you've got your little corner stitched and lap basted down, you're going to go ahead and join your sleeve. So if you're doing it the normal way, right sides together, matching up your notches and stitch down. Or if you're doing the French seam, you're going to match wrong sides together. I'm going to go ahead and get this pinned so I can do my French seams. We'll join our sleeve and come right back. Once you have your sleeve seam sewn up, then you're going to sew 2 rows of gathering stitches around the bottom of the sleeve. So now that we've got our gathering stitches in, I'm going to go ahead and start gathering the bottom of the sleeve and the top of the sleeve cap together. I'm going to set the sleeves off to the side and then work on the cuffs. For the cuffs, I'm not putting regular buttons on. I'm going to be putting Rolo loop buttons on. So I'll show you that process in just a moment here. Alrighty, so go ahead and do that on the other sleeve, and then I'm going to go ahead and grab my cuffs here. For the cuffs, I'm going to show you how I did the Rolo loops. So for this step, it's totally optional. If you want to do just the 3 buttons like it indicates on the pattern, that's totally fine. But for the Rolo loops, where the very edge of where the buttons start on the pattern, I've marked that with a line. It's about 1 inch in. So instead of 3 buttons, I'll be putting 5 buttons on. So I'll be making 5 loops total here. So I put a little tick mark here to indicate my seam allowance. So once I show you this and we baste it down, you're still going to baste the Rolo loops down at your 5/8 of an inch seam allowance to baste them in place. But this line here, it is again 1 inch in, but that's just to indicate where the loops will start or where the buttons start on the pattern here. I'm going to zoom in I'm going to go through the process on this opposite cuff here so you can see what I did for the roller loops. And I also made some covered buttons here out of my fabric, so those will be going on too. So what I did was I took a 32-inch long strip, about an inch wide of my fabric, and along the grain of the fabric with the most stretch here, and just folded it over and sewed it down at about a quarter of an inch, and then turned it out with a loop turner. It's finished here, just not basted down. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna pin it above your line that you've got marked for that first button. Okay, pin that in place. And depending on if you're right-handed or left-handed, this may be a little bit easier to, when you're doing the opposite cuff, to flip it. So the technique I use is folding it back over, and when it comes to the side where the actual loop is going to be for the button, I took the tail of the loop, turned it towards me, and then turned it back the opposite way and pinned it. So I'll zoom in on that just so that way you can see it. Take the tail and fold it towards you, and hold that down in place with your finger, and then turn the loop back and then pin. So we'll fold it back. Where's the other way? Alrighty. Okay, we're in business now. Okay, so taking the tail, fold it towards yourself, and where I'm making that fold hit is right there at the edge of my marked line. So all these lines are roughly about the width of my buttons. So you'll want to, for yours, if you're doing this technique, you'll just want to measure like how wide your buttons are, and then that'll give you the amount that your loops need to be. Okay, so taking the tail, I'm going to fold it. I'm going to hold this part down and fold it towards me, and then hold the edge of it down and fold it away from me. Once you have it how you like it, go ahead and baste it at your 5/8 of an inch just to hold those loops in place. Okay, so once you have your loops basted down, you're going to take the 5/8 of an inch seam allowance on the side without the notch. So notch here, press that up, and then trim it down to 3/8 of an inch. Go ahead and do this for both of your cuffs. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and grab our sleeve, and then we're going to pin our sleeve edge to our cuff with the right sides together. And you're going to match the edges of the sleeve to the small dots that are marked. Make sure you match that notch. And once we have it pinned down at those 3 main touch points, we're going to kind of fuss over the gathers to kind of distribute it out. Once you've got this pinned, go ahead and stitch it down at your 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you've got it stitched, you're going to trim this edge to about 3/8 and then press that seam edge in toward the cuff. So go ahead and do that and then come back. Once you have that seam trim, you're going to fold back your cuff along that fold line and then match it up with the 2 small dots where your 3/8 of an inch seam allowance overlap. you're going to pin the sides. Once you have the sides pinned, you're going to stitch along the two ends at your 5/8 inch seam allowance. Once you have the two ends stitched together, go ahead and trim those seams down to about 3/8 and also trim your corners. Once you're done there, you're going to flip the cuff to the outside and you're going to go ahead and press it flat, and then also press your seam toward the inside of the cuff, and then you're going to overlap that edge, catching that seam allowance on the inside of the cuff and pin it in place. And once you have that pinned in place, you can base this down and stitch in the ditch, or you can hand slip stitch it, or even better yet, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand baste it on the inside end and then turn it over to the outside and stitch in the ditch with my machine. So pick your poison, do that, and then come on back. We're all done with stitching that cuff in the ditch. So at this point, if you want to go ahead and add your buttons on for your cuff, you can. Or if you want to just mark off the placement for your buttons for now, that's totally fine. But I'm going to clip this and we're going to work on attaching the sleeve to our blouse now. So I'm attaching my sleeve with French seams as well. So what I'm going to do is while the sleeve is turned right side out, I'm going to match up my front and my back notches just to make sure I've got the left sleeve and the right sleeve in the proper place. So once I've done that, I'm going to turn my sleeve inside out. Then I'm going to insert that sleeve from the inside. I'm going to match up my side seam and my notches and making sure I'm matching wrong sides together. Matching together all the important points. So front notch, back notch, and the small circles at the top of the cap of the sleeve. And once I get everything pinned in place, I am going to adjust my gathers and just make sure I have them evenly distributed. And I'm just going to ease it in, just adjusting those gathering stitches and pin it in place. And because this is a bishop sleeve, it is going to have a few gathers at the top of the cap. All right, so once you have it set, go ahead and take it over to your machine and you're going to sew this at 1/4 of an inch around the circumference. So let's get that done. Once you have that sleeve sewn in at 1/4 of an inch, trim this down to 1/8 of an inch, and then you're going to turn it inwards and press it, and then you're going to pinch this off and then stitch it all the way around at 3/8 of an inch. So I'm going to go ahead and trim down my seam and we'll get that done. All right, so trim that 1/4 of an inch seam allowance down to 1/8 of an inch. And we're flipping this back over to the inside and see that seam. So I just showing it from the right side just so that way you can see it. But we're going to flip this inward here, and then now we're going to go around at 3/8 of an inch. So once you got that done, this is how it should look. And of course, before you sew it, you can press it so that extra bit of seam lays flat for you. All right, turning this back out to the right side, and we're good to go. And now we're going to work on our hem. So for this, I usually cheat with serging it, but what you're going to do is you're going to have a 1/2 inch hem. So we're going to turn it in at 1/4 of an inch and fold it over one more time at 1/4 of an inch. And once you've turned it over twice at 1/4 of an inch, one each time, so that's where you're getting your 1/2 an inch, you're going to stitch it down all the way around the hem at that 1/4 of an inch. So go ahead and pin it and then stitch your hem at the 1/4 of an inch and then meet me back here. Last step, my lovelies, and we're home free. So now all we have left to do is attach our buttons if you didn't do that earlier. So I'm going to put my covered buttons on my cuffs. And then for my plackets, I'm putting these clear cat eye buttons. I'm going to bring them up closer so that way you can see them. cat eye, keeping with the pussy bow theme. I've got this little tiny one here that's going to go on the very end. And once you sew these on, sew your buttonholes and you're done. And there you have it. Our pussy bow blouse is all said and done. I really hope you enjoyed this sew along. Thank you so much for watching. And if you found it helpful, then consider subscribing and give this video a like. Also, if you enjoyed this video, here are a couple more I think you might like. And until next time, keep sketching, keep sewing, and keep the momentum going. Take care, y'all.